Hello. Thank you for coming back to the podcast. This is episode number 100. I think that was right. I think that was 100. Thank you so very much for coming back to What Did AI Say at VickyL-4AI on YouTube. As I always stated, we are on episode 100. And boy, do we have a great question today. Let's go ahead and jump right into the episode. But first, let's remember gratitude is the attitude and will always be the attitude. Okay, we're going to start with ChatGPT's answer, and the question is, why did patriarchy supporters actively seek to dismantle biarchal, egalitarian, matrilineal, and other types of societies? That's a good one. Oh, this is going to be good. Many patriarchal systems did not emerge through a single conspiracy or coordinated campaign. Okay. They developed over long periods of time through changes in warfare, in property ownership, in religion, in state formation, in labor systems, and in inheritance. But once patriarchal institutions became established, elites and states often did actively suppress societies organized around more egalitarian, matrilineal, or dual gender biarchal structures because those systems conflicted with patriarchal control over land, labor, lineage, and authority. Ooh, ChatGPT just said a mouthful right there. Okay, let's read that again. Many patriarchal systems did not emerge through a single conspiracy or coordinated campaign. They developed over long periods through changes in warfare, in property ownership, in religion, in state formation, labor systems, and in inheritance. But once patriarchal institutions became established, elites and states often did actively suppress societies organized around more egalitarian, matrilineal, or dual gender, which is biarchal structures, because those systems conflicted with patriarchal control over land, labor, lineage, and authority. Wow. Was not expecting that from ChatGPT. Okay. That's good. That's good. Okay. Let's take a break for just a moment because I want to just quickly go over these three different types of systems that existed before patriarchy so that you are more familiar with them. Okay. Let's start with biarchal. A system of governance or social structure where power and authority are shared equally by two distinct leaders, groups, or genders. Egalitarian, egalitarian, a system where everyone is treated the same with equal rights with little to no regard for gender. And matrilineal, a system based on kinship with the mother or female line. And matriarchy is along the same lines, but it also has a tendency to delve into egalitarian also. Matriarchy is not like patriarchy where the males are suppressed like the women are suppressed in the patriarchy system. Matriarchy is just the lineage is passed like the matrilineal, the lineage is passed and the women rule, but the system is more like a egalitarian where everyone is treated equally and has, equal responsibilities, and it doesn't have anything to do with gender. Okay, Now that you've been brought up to speed on all of those different societies that existed before patriarchy, let's go ahead and continue with ChatGPT's answer. Several major forces drove this process to patriarchy. Control of inheritance and property. Always about that control. In many matrilineal societies, descent, inheritance, or clan identity passed through women. Land might be collectively held or managed through maternal kin networks. As agriculture intensified and private property accumulated, many male elites wanted, listen to this, clear biological heirs, patrilineal inheritance, greater control over women's sexuality and reproduction, stable transfer of wealth between fathers and sons. Let's read that again because that is major. Control of inheritance and property. In many matrilineal societies, descent, inheritance, or clan identity passed through women. Land might be collectively held or managed through maternal kin networks. As agriculture intensified and private property accumulated, many male elites wanted clear biological heirs. This is why patriarchy wants so much power over women's sexuality and reproduction. This is why. Clear biological heirs, patrilineal inheritance, greater control over women's sexuality and reproduction, stable transfer of wealth between fathers and sons. Always comes back to control and money. Patriarchal family structures help centralize property and political power. Patriarchal family structures help centralize property and political power. The two things, along with wealth, that we do not want centralized. You don't want centralized property ownership. You don't want centralized political power. And you don't want centralized wealth. We don't want any of that. But this is what patriarchy guarantees. Examples include ancient Mediterranean societies shifting from older kinship systems toward male-dominated household authority. Again, patriarchy is not natural. It was not first. It came on the back of colonialism, religion, and the elites' greed for control and money. Okay, let's get that straight. Another reason why we are not taught our history. Let's continue. Colonial administrations rewriting inheritance laws to favor male ownership. Religious legal systems formalizing male guardianship. State formation and militarization. Large centralized states often relied on standing armies, taxation, territorial expansion, hierarchical chains of command. Okay, let's read through that again. Okay, examples include ancient Mediterranean society shifting from older kinship systems toward male-dominated household authority. Colonial administrations rewriting inheritance laws to favor male ownership. Religious legal systems formalizing male guardianship. State formation and militarization. Large centralized states often relied on standing armies, taxation, territorial expansion, hierarchical chains of command. Highly militarized societies frequently elevated masculine warrior roles and concentrated authority in male leadership classes. More decentralized or consensus-based societies, including some matrilineal and egalitarian communities, could resist incorporation into empires because leadership was distributed, women often held economic or political authority, kinship obligations competed with state control. Let's read that again. More decentralized or consensus-based societies, including some matrilineal and egalitarian communities, could resist incorporation into empires because leadership was distributed. Women often held economic or political authority. Kinship obligations competed with state control. Empires historically tended to replace local governance systems with patriarchal administrative systems that were easier to standardize and tax. Let's reread that. Empires historically tended to replace local governance systems with patriarchal administrative systems that were easier to standardize and tax. Keep in mind, these patriarchal systems were not first. They're not natural. They're not divine. I don't even know the word. They're not ordained by God because they're not natural. So, I don't want to get off on I'm not going to get off on another tangent here, but let's go ahead and continue. Okay, so empires historically tended to replace local governance systems with patriarchal administrative systems that were easier to standardize and tax. Religious institutionalization. Many patriarchal systems became reinforced through organized religion. I'm going to read that again. Many patriarchal systems became reinforced through organized religion. Some religious traditions elevated male priesthoods, framed male authority as divinely sanctioned. This is organized religion. Organized religion framed male authority as divinely sanctioned. God didn't do that. God didn't do that. The rewritten Bible that we were all taught from did, but not God. Restricted women's legal or spiritual autonomy, linked family order with cosmic or moral order. At the same time, many earlier or parallel traditions included female spiritual leaders. You hear that? At the same time, many earlier traditions or parallel traditions included female spiritual leaders, goddess traditions, complementary gender roles, more flexible kinship structures. As religions became tied to states and empires, institutional patriarchal interpretations often gained power. As religions became tied to states and empires, institutional patriarchal interpretations often gained power. Colonialism and cultural suppression. European colonial powers frequently dismantled indigenous governance systems that included matrilineal inheritance, women chiefs or clan mothers, shared authority structures, communal land ownership. You hear that? European colonial powers frequently dismantled indigenous governance systems that included these other types of systems that conflicted with patriarchy. They dismantled them because they could not control them. They could not tax them. Colonizers often viewed these systems as uncivilized. That's what they did. They called them uncivilized. They called the people savages because they weren't a part of the patriarchy system. Not because they were doing outlandish things, but because they were outside of the patriarchy control. That's why. They were uncivilized. They were savages. You got to learn this history. Examples include the suppression of governance traditions among the Haudenosaunee, I don't know if I said that right, Haudenosaunee Confederacy, where clan mothers held major political influence. British colonial restructuring of gender relations in parts of Africa and South Asia. Spanish colonial imposition of patriarchal Catholic legal systems in the Americas. Colonial governments frequently negotiated only with men, impose male property ownership, and undermine women's traditional authority. So there you have it. Colonial governments frequently negotiated only with men, imposed male property ownership, and undermined women's traditional authority. Economic labor systems. Patriarchal systems also benefited ruling classes economically. You hear that? Patriarchal systems also benefited ruling classes economically. Why? Let's hear why. Controlling women's labor and reproduction helped maintain agricultural labor forces, inheritance continuity, domestic labor systems, and population growth. Do you hear that? Patriarchal systems also benefited ruling classes economically because controlling women's labor and reproduction helped maintain agricultural labor forces, inheritance continuity, domestic labor systems, population growth. In many societies, unpaid or under-recognized labor by women became structurally important to economic systems. So, basically, in patriarchy societies, diminishing women's value and their input became a structurally important economic to that system, to the patriotic economic system. Diminishing the importance and the production and the output of women was standard. That became standard to that patriarchal system. Egalitarian societies that distributed labor and authority more broadly sometimes conflicted with emerging class hierarchies. Of course they did. Ideological justification. Once patriarchal systems became dominant, you hear this? Once patriarchal systems became dominant, they often justified themselves as as natural, divinely ordained, biologically inevitable, necessary for social order. Wow. Just looking at our system over the past 3 or 4 decades, over the past 3 or 4 centuries, you got to know this isn't true. Let me just reread this again. The ideological justification. Once patriarchal systems became dominant, they weren't first, they weren't natural, because the ones that were natural were the ones that were first. But once patriarchal systems became dominant, they often justified themselves as natural, divinely ordained, because they came on the back of colonialism and organized religion. Biologically inevitable and necessary for social order. Not necessary for social order, necessary for control and taxation by the elite. For control, for wealth, for taxation by the elite. That's why. This allowed elites to portray alternative systems as chaotic, immoral, or primitive. Historical records were also often written by male elites, of course. Of course they were. Which means many egalitarian or women-centered systems were minimized, misunderstood, or intentionally misrepresented. Let's reread that. Historical records were also often written by male elites, which means many egalitarian or women-centered systems were minimized, misunderstood, or intentionally misrepresented. Important nuance, and this is going to be Chatgpt summary. Not all matrilineal societies were fully egalitarian, and not all patriarchal societies were uniformly oppressive in the same ways. Human societies have existed across a wide spectrum. That was really good by Chatgpt. I'm impressed. I'm impressed with how they presented the information for this question. That was really good. Let's go ahead and see what the Chinese AI has to say about this topic. This is going to be interesting because remember, in China, they did have that time where they were only allowed one child, and what happened? What happened? They would keep the boys and get rid of the girls, which led to, nobody ever critical thinks, okay, who will all of these male children marry once they grow up if we're getting rid of all of the females? Oh, they're going to have to leave. Or, I did read an article about a man decided that he was going to keep his female daughters. And so I think he ended up having 10 or 12 of them. And he made a great deal of money from their suitors, because the suitors would come, because he was one of the only families that had Chinese females that were able to be married. And so the suitors would come, giving him gifts and riches for the opportunity to date and possibly marry his well sought after female Chinese girls. So that was a very interesting article that I read, and it was crazy. But yeah, I'm interested to see what Deepseek has to say about this. Okay. Just in case you forgot the question, and I'm sorry for going off on another tangent, but just in case you forgot the question, let me repeat it. Why did patriarchy supporters actively seek to dismantle biarchal, egalitarian, matrilineal, and other types of societies? This is a great question because it gets at a common misconception that patriarchy was a conscious conspiracy by men to seize power. Okay, I mean, Chatgpt told us that they couldn't say it was a conscious effort, but once it took off, the elites grabbed hold of it. Okay, let's continue. Instead, most scholars see patriarchy emerging gradually through a convergence of material and social forces. The key drivers likely included the shift to agriculture and private property as societies moved from hunting-gathering to plow-based agriculture 6,000 to 8,000 years ago. Physical strength became a productive advantage. More critically, the concept of inheritable private property, land and herds, created a need to control paternity, ensuring wealth passed to biological sons. Again, just in case you want to know why patriarchy systems are so controlling of women's sexuality and their reproduction, this is why. It all has to do with money. Where the wealth passes down to. Okay. This drove patrilineal inheritance and the restriction of female sexuality. Warfare and specialization. Larger agricultural societies saw more organized warfare. Male-dominated warrior classes gained political power, and patrilineal patriarchal structures proved effective for mobilizing armies and maintaining clear lines of succession. State formation. Early states consolidated power through male-headed households, with laws codifying male authority in Babylonian, Roman, and Chinese codes. You hear that? Babylonian, Roman, and Chinese codes. This wasn't always a plot. Rulers found that standardizing family structures made taxation conscription, and social control easier. What about active dismantling? We do see violent conquest. Okay, here we go. It's just like what Chatgpt said. It didn't start out as an active dismantling, but let's see. We do see violent conquest, for example, Indo-European migrations overwhelming old Europe's matrilineal goddess-worshipping cultures, legal suppression, example, Christian authorities wiping out Celtic Brehon law, which gave women property rights, and coercive conversion, the Spanish missionaries destroying indigenous gender diverse roles. But these weren't patriarchy supporters as a self-conscious group. They were conquerors, priests, or lawmakers imposing their own familiar social order, often without even recognizing the alternatives they were erasing. Okay, did you hear that? These weren't patriarchy supporters as a self-conscious group. They were conquerors, priests, or lawmakers imposing their own familiar social order, often without even recognizing the alternatives they were erasing. Just call them savage. Just call them uncivilized. Let's not even study and try to learn about their system. Let's not bother, because ours gives us the most power. Ours gives us the most money. Don't matter which is better. It's which one we can rob and steal from. Okay, so the motive wasn't usually we must destroy matrilineal. It was more we need clear heirs, agriculture. We must control resources, property. Our gods command this religion, or simply, our way is the civilized way, imperialism. Patriarchy emerged as a systemic adaptation to new conditions, then reproduced itself through law, religion, and violence. Okay, let's repeat all of that. So the motive wasn't usually we must destroy matrilineal. It was more we need clear heirs, agriculture. We must control resources, property. Our gods command this, religion. Or simply, our way is the civilized way, imperialism. Patriarchy emerged as a systemic adaptation to new conditions, then reproduced itself through law, religion, and violence. Patriarchy was not first. It is not natural. It was not ordained by God. Oh, wow. I think we're at Deepseek's final statement here. Does that distinction between conscious plot and emergent system make sense? I can give concrete examples of societies that successfully resisted, like the Minangkabau of West Sumatra, to show how it wasn't inevitable. I believe I butchered that name. But yeah, that was the end for Deepseek. Wow, Deepseek really didn't go into it a lot. And I guess because its history is kind of shaky. Okay, so Chatgpt really gave us the gist of it all. How does any of this affect our daily lives? Well, the reason I'm delving back into this subject is just because of the utter complete mess our country, as far as our U.S. government, is in. And just saying to myself, why is patriarchy even our system? It's a disaster. And it is only used for control, wealth, and taxation. That's the only reason. Control, wealth, and taxation. I keep stating that a two-party system is a disservice to United States citizens, and it is. I mean, many other countries have multi political parties. I think we've already done a podcast episode on that particular subject. So I can't tell you offhand what episode number it was, but if you just go back through and read the titles, you'll come across it. So, I mean, I keep saying that, we're at a disservice. There are countries that don't even have a fourth of our population who have over 20 political parties that they can select from, with 6 or 7 having a great deal of power with each election. Not just only 2. So us agreeing as citizens to a 2-party system that is easily corrupted, and this is what other countries know better than us. You can corrupt a 2-party system. You can corrupt both parties exactly like what we're living through right now. So a 2-party system is a disservice, but also a patriarchy system is a disservice. Why are we doing it? Why are we literally giving the elites the control that they have had and that they continue to have? We have to take away that power in order to make sure that everyone has equality in our country. Okay. I'm going to go ahead. I think that we've covered that. Let me go ahead and move on to our positive saying for today. Oh, man, I hope I highlighted one in my notebook here. Oh, I didn't, but this is a good one. I hope I didn't already use this one, but I like it. I like this one. This is a Malcolm X saying. I like it. Be peaceful, be courteous, obey the law, respect everyone. But if someone puts his hand on you, send him to the cemetery. Let me repeat that. Malcolm X. Be peaceful, be courteous, obey the law, respect everyone. But if someone puts his hands on you, send him to the cemetery. Okay, whew. We completely went over on this one. Forgive me. This subject is definitely going to require a deeper dive. We're going to go into all the different systems maybe that existed before patriarchy came on the scene, and just basically understand why they worked and how they worked, and how they diversified power, how they diversified control, and how they diversified wealth, and so that not 1% of a population had 99% of the wealth, the power, the land, and the control, and 99% of the population had to distribute 1% of the property, the wealth, the control, and the power. So we'll definitely do a deeper dive into this subject. Okay, that's it for episode number 100. Thank you so very much for giving me about 34 minutes of your time. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel. We the people have the power. See you next episode. Peace.